Hello and welcome to Marathon Swim Stories. I'm marathon swimmer and coach Shannon Keegan. In today's episode, Ken Immer talks us through his transformation into becoming an open water marathon swimmer. I met Ken while recording one of Gia's Journey episodes, as he'd previously kayaked for her on one of her swims. Thinking that I finally had a line on a support kayaker, I followed up with Ken, and in further conversation found out that he's also a marathon swimmer. In today's episode, we talk about how he got started with swimming, and we'll follow up someday to find out more about his support kayaking experiences. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Yeah.
Ken, good morning. Thank you for taking time out to talk to me. Tell me, what's your story?
Sure. Wow. So I have maybe I'm going to say classic, but classic for me. I don't know that's classic for everybody else, but adult onset swimming.
Yeah, it's definitely, I wouldn't, the classic for marathon swimming seems to be I swam all my life. I took a long break and started again. So I love the classic adult set because I think can be more inspirational to people. So
Yeah.
tell me how you got started.
I did learn how to swim as a young child, and I grew up in Florida. So we did spend a lot of time on the water. I was an avid water skier, so obviously, the ability to feel comfortable in the water was something that I gained as a kid. So I was around water. We lived on the water. We had a boat on davits on a canal, and then we had a pool right there. So I spent a lot of time in the water. So it's not that I wasn't a swimmer in any capacity, but I never did anything competitively. And in high school, I actually did go to one tryout for the swim team, partially, I think, because my brother did it in his high school, because I don't think that I was really into it necessarily. My memory was, like I was using it as some form of sort of exercise, and we had a small pool, so swimming across that pool was not preparing me at any moment to swim across a 25-yard pool. And I'm pretty sure my memory of it, and I've blocked most of it out, but it was that I crossed the pool, made it back, got out of the water, walked over to my mom and said, "We're going home."
not a swim team guy.
So, because it was just like I was done at that, it was like, wait, there's more to practice. So when I got out of the water, we left, and then that was the last time I really ever thought about doing that. So it wasn't anything that I expected. So I became a yoga teacher much later in my life, and that was my main form of exercise for, over 12, 13 years, I guess. And over time, I spent a lot of time, my body was telling me that I should do something else too, but my need to keep myself really limber and all into yoga seemed to overarch that. And the one thing that's an important piece, but not all that important, was that previous to that, I was actually a drug addict. And that's a whole nother call. And yoga is what kind of saved me from that. So I stuck with that for many, many, many years. Right. And on my 39th birthday, I woke up and I said to myself, I think I need to reevaluate and just is yoga just the only thing for me? And the answer was, why don't I just start something else? So I built a new habit of a new exercise regime over the course of the next 60 days. So the first thing I just started doing was I was doing push-ups every day, as many as I could. And that was it. It was a way of building a new habit of some other kind of exercise so I was like slowly collecting time away from my day to put into something else. And over the course of about, I guess, 4 months, I made it up to doing this outdoor workout that took me near a pool. All right, so here's where the pool kind of comes
Yeah.
in. I know you're
Like,
like, all right, so where's
hmm.
the pool?
No, no, I
Um,
get it. I get it.
so it was getting cold outside. So I would like go down, I would ride my bike to this track and I would run around the track, or I would ride my bike around the track and I would do pull-ups on the, the, the goalposts for the football. And like, I was doing all this crazy stuff outside that I thought was really fun. And as it got colder and colder, I realized I was like, I can't do this in the house. And I wasn't ready to join a gym. That didn't feel appropriate at the time. And I look over, and next to the pool, there's this semi-permanent structure that's over a pool that I knew was there. And I thought, I bet it's heated. I see people coming out of there every morning. So wonder what's going on. Maybe I could swim during the winter and just
Hmm.
keep some activity moving. Like I know
Hmm.
it could be good exercise for me. So I walk over to the pool and I walk in and I see the man who, quite frankly, is responsible for all of this on the first day. And I ask him, so what's the story? How does one come in here and use the pool? And he's like, that's $1 a day. You can come swim laps. We have this time. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a bargain, like no brainer. And I was like, yes, what is the pool's heated, right? And he's like, oh yeah. So I was like, okay, sounds great. So I think the next day I went ahead and, or maybe within a few days, I don't know how that really worked out. My memory of getting in the pool is kind of blurred by just staying in. So I went in, like swam my first laps or two, and it was a little easier than maybe it had been when I was in high school and did that first crossing, because this was a 50-meter pool. So it was challenging, and I remember it was really hard, but I thought, all right, well, this is difficult, and I think this can keep me from losing whatever ground I've gained through the exercise regimen that I had already created. So I was like, all right, this will probably work. So I came the next day. It came the next day, and it turned out that there was a swim team, a master's swim team that was practicing, and they were getting out about the time I was arriving at one point. So I would see them some days when I would get there a little earlier. I would see them finishing up, and I would always be like, wow, those people are really swimmers, and I could never do that. And there were a few other people that would come and swim and do their own thing. And a couple of times I had people asking me, oh, what are you training for? And my first answer was, nothing, just swimming. Are you going to do the low country splash? And this is the
Oh.
local 2.4-mile swim in the river. And of
Before we get
course,
before we get into your you're getting ready to go places. Tell me what it felt like when you get back in the water after. I mean, you hadn't really had you been in and playing in around water with that big break, or like, yeah, tell me what that was like.
yeah, I guess I probably, I'd go to the beach and I'd swim and stuff. So I mean, it was just always a thing. I
Okay.
don't know that I ever felt like I was away, because I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at the time. So I was just a few minutes away from the beach, which
Mm.
some years I would go, and then there would be years I wouldn't go to the beach at all. But at one point I lived with a pool behind the house at one of my, addresses and things. So it was never totally foreign,
Okay.
but this time it was definitely like I was approaching it with a completely different mindset, that this was a
Right.
place for exercise and not
Yeah.
um not fun. And
Yeah.
well, I don't want to say that, not fun,
Right.
but you know what
Right.
I mean, not entertainment. There we go.
Right.
And that was really the big difference, and
Yeah.
recognizing that it was pushing me, and I was ready to be pushed, because I
Okay.
had spent those months really building the habit of the space.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
So it felt really interesting. I guess my mind was open. I was ready to do something new.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know where you're coming from. So, did you find any resources for like building endurance or like your stroke or technique, or are we kind of getting to that right around this time?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
So, like I said, had remembered the basics of how to swim. All I don't know that I ever really accomplished butterfly. I kind of knew what the idea was, maybe, but the
Hmm.
other three, I had some semblance of how to do them. But this is where the guy that was at the pool, his name's Doug, and he was actually the coach of the Masters team, and he was like the aquatics director. He happened to be also the lifeguard for the first like hour in the morning because
Hmm.
nobody else was
Right.
working at the time.
Yeah.
So he would watch me, and clearly he saw something in me because he would offer, like, after a few weeks, I think he started talking to me a little bit and like, oh, why don't you try this or that? And just was giving me these little tiny pointers. And this guy is a brilliant coach. I have to say, like, he has become like, he's the reason that I survived because he believed in me. He actually ended up getting me to get onto the Masters team. Like
Hmm.
he really pushed me without pushing me. He just
Yeah.
coached me without even being my coach, which I don't know how he did that.
That's pretty genius. Yeah. Yeah. Most people
So
don't welcome unsolicited advice either. So
yeah,
he must
but
have
like I
looked
said, I was
open. Yeah.
ready. And I
Yeah.
think that the moment he saw that I was accepting of anything that he said, he just stepped right in, as a good coach should.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So this man totally transformed my life. I was just planning on just making it through the winter and then waiting until the spring came, which in Charleston, South Carolina is not long.
Right.
I mean, this was just going to be a couple of
Few
months of
months. Yeah.
trudging through the water. So I was willing to just suffer for a bit at that point. So he started, giving me some extra little pointers here and there, and nothing too outrageous, but just enough
Hmm.
to give me some feeling of comfort. And then the big thing for me, though, and this is honestly, this just popped back in my head, was that the breathing was the hardest part, as most
Yep.
people are always going to say, right?
Yep.
And I'd been a yoga teacher
Hmm.
for a long time. I taught yoga for like 12 years and I had practiced for more than that. So one day I just thought to myself, this breathing thing's really hard. What if I approached it like a breathing exercise?
Hmm.
Hmm. Because in yoga, we've got a number of different breathing techniques that we use, and some of them are more sort of, constant, in things where you're really taking some deeper breaths.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, let's just see what happens. So I got in the water and I swam across, and I didn't think about my stroke at all, but I was just like, so what could I do about breathing? How could I
Hmm.
make this an exercise? I made it all the way across the pool and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that was kind of easy. Let me try again, and I swam back across using the same, and I don't even know what I was doing, but I was really focused on my
The
breathing more
breathing.
so than just
Then
feeling
just.
like I was drowning, which was kind of what I had been dealing with. And it was easy again. And I thought, well, hot dog, I think I got this thing figured out,
Yeah.
and then I just kept doing that. And then it quickly developed into what my breath was. And lucky for me, I started bilateral breathing.
Nice. Yeah. It's a good
And
one.
that may have been by Doug's recommendation, or I may have just naturally did it. I don't know how that got. I was lucky that kind of became my initial thing. Um, so I just kept swimming, and that was really like the beginning. If I really think about it in those terms, now what do you say when you're in the middle of a marathon? Just keep swimming.
Yep. Yep.
So it seemed like a natural fit, although I had no idea what was in store for me. I still had no designs, even though it was easier in that moment. I had no idea that I was going to stick with it. It was just a thing I was doing. Oh, this swimming, and I was seeing these other athletes do their thing, and I'm like, that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a
Yeah.
competitive athlete. I'm not that good. I'm just exercising. But that right there, that word exercising was something that really shifted, because everyone kept asking me, "Oh, what are you training for? What are you training for?" And at first I was just like, "Well, I'm not. That's not what I do. And I'm not going to swim in the river. Like, what the hell are you thinking?" And I saw like a YouTube video or a Facebook video or something that just said, "Stop exercising and start training." And the difference between the two,
Oh, fascinating.
that exercise was just something that you were doing with very little sort of external motivation or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then training, there was a goal. And for some reason, that just really landed for me, because there were some days where it was hard to get out of bed and get to the pool and do my thing, because it was cold. It was the winter, for crying out
Mm-hmm.
loud. And this was one of those semi-permanent structures with no
Right.
HVAC. The pool was the heater. So it
Right.
was it was chilly in there. It was definitely not a warm space.
Yeah.
Um and so when they said that one day, it just kind of landed, and I was like, huh, I don't know. Maybe that would be a good idea. Um, and at one point over winter break, this was in December, I came into the pool one day and Doug said to me, "Hey, I know you usually swim from this time to this time. I'm going to need you to either swim earlier
Mm-hmm.
or later, because the College of Charleston swim team was doing doubles, and they would do their morning at our pool and then their afternoon at the pool at the college."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." Later's kind of challenging because it's later in the day. And I was like, "All right, earlier. Wow, a whole hour earlier." Well, this is a raw and real interview. I have to say, I was a 39-year-old guy, and the first day that I'm swimming early, and then it's time to get out of the pool, and there's 60 college swimmer athletes walking into this building. My motivation for coming back the next day was increased just a little bit. Let's just be honest.
Okay. Okay. So some people would not be motivated by that, but you were motivated.
Well, it was the eye candy, Shannon. It
Okay.
wasn't the fact that there were
Okay.
these athletes. All right, let's
Okay.
just be
Okay.
let's
Okay.
just be
All right.
clear about that.
Okay.
And I like
Okay.
boys.
Okay.
So yeah, so let's just be clear.
Yeah.
So that was, again, like one more reason to keep coming back. So it was like, okay, this whole training idea, and then there's this, and then and now I'm swimming alongside the Masters team. All right, they're doing their thing in like four
Right. You're
lanes.
like, I'm
I'm
just over
over to
here.
the side, and I'm listening to what they're doing,
Right.
and it's still sounding out of reach. But then I start, because I'm getting out of the pool at the same time the team is. So I'm
Mhm.
listening to them talk, and then they start talking to me, and we start creating relationships, and just, okay, maybe all right, I'll do the swim in the river. Y'all
Mhm.
have talked me into it. I'm not going to join the team, but I'm going to swim in the river.
2 miles. You were ready to go do 2 miles in the river without
Well,
being
that wasn't until the spring. So I
okay.
was willing to start
Okay.
training.
Okay. Okay. You're making the shift from
Right. So
exercising to
then as I'm
training.
coming in, I'm starting to swim more and more. And at that point, I didn't really understand what it meant to maybe do sets and stuff. So I was really just doing distance swimming
Got
practices
it.
on
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
own. I would get in and I would swim. I might stop whenever I wanted to, but at the end of the day, it was just a lot of back and forth. There wasn't
Mhm.
the type of master sets that they were doing, and I had
Thresholds
absolutely no
and
idea that I
yeah,
was going to get
aerobic.
faster. It was
Right.
really just about the endurance, because that was what I was enjoying too. It was this whole idea of, instead of, yoga gives you a sense of endurance, but it's definitely not very brute strength building. It builds
Mm.
a much deeper sort of strength. And the one thing that I do want to mention is that, I hear a lot of people that come to swimming as adults, everybody kind of has their shoulder injury story from when they
Mm.
started. Like, oh, I started and then this shoulder kind of hurt and then it got better, or, oh, I hurt myself and I had surgery. Like, there's all these different stories. I never had any of that.
Yeah. You probably had
As a
some native balance and
and as a yogi,
awareness.
we do a lot of this movement,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Mm-hmm.
create a lot of space. So I had the room to do it, which made me
Mm-hmm.
more coachable
Yeah.
because of that. And then also the other thing that yoga brings to the table is the proprioception
Yes.
of your body, so
Mm-hmm.
that even though in the water it doesn't
It's different,
necessarily
right?
totally translate, but the idea of it is there.
Yes.
Because when
Well,
when he
you
would say,
want the
you're crossing
awareness.
over, and I
Yeah.
would say, no, I'm not, and he would say, yes, you are, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to believe him because he's
Yeah.
looking at me. So it
Right.
feels like I'm way out here,
Yeah.
but and then he's like, no, you're doing it right. So even though the feeling was off, I had some kind of North Star.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's well, d having the awareness, desiring to make that association is huge. And yeah, like you said, even just being very coachable that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's something that I've always been. And I was, and I was looking at it as like, okay, this guy is an expert, and I'm enjoying being here. I still didn't realize that I was getting out of the pool, or wasn't getting out of the pool. I still thought I was going back at that point,
Okay.
probably. I don't know when that shift actually happened, as far as like I'm leaving swimming eventually, but I was just having a good time. I'm
Yeah.
showing up and meeting these people and just enjoying being in the water, and I was getting better pretty
Mhm.
quickly. And that was the
Mhm.
other thing that I think Doug saw, was that, a lot of people, he sees them come for years and they never progress in the pool. A lot of the
Right.
lap swimmers, they
Yes,
just
that
kind of
is
do their
huge
thing.
incentive as a coach is when somebody's actually responsive and,
Yeah.
and they can, yeah, and you say something and then they do it and you're like, and then they see improvement and you feel like you're actually contributing versus, yeah, saying the same thing over to, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
huge.
that was all happening, but I was just in the middle of it. I was just having a good time. Like, okay,
Yeah.
this is a lot of fun, and all right, I'm going to do that, that swim in the river. And then as it was getting closer and closer, Doug kept saying, "You should swim with us," because I was swimming at that point. I stayed coming to practice at the same time because I got used to it. Like, why do
Mm-hmm.
I need to shift back to 7? I'll stay here at 6.
Mm-hmm.
Was that time? Yeah, it was at 6. And and then, like, at least one day, he roped me into practice while I was doing my lap swim.
That's a good coach.
And I didn't even really know how it happened. Like, they were doing one of those drills where you're swimming and you're kind of like doing the high five,
Mm.
with two swimmers. And it just so happened that the guy in the lane next to me, which was the fastest guy on the team. Okay, let's just be clear about that. He gets me in the lane with him because he didn't have a buddy. He was like, swim with
Mhm.
him. And I was like, and I at this point I'd been with him long enough that I was like, all right, I'll do what you say, So I get in the lane with him and we're doing this, high five drill down the pool. And then he's like, okay, that's over. You can go back. And I don't know. For some reason, it was very endearing because I felt like this guy cared about me,
Mhm.
and if someone is caring about you and they're giving you good information, I'm going to respond to that. So there was a camp, like a little 6-week sort of get you ready for the splash thing that was put on by a different coach in town every year. The guy that actually runs the swim, he was Mark Rutledge. He was an Olympic. I think he was on the team. I don't think he ever, or at least he went to the trials. He was up there. He was a good
Mhm.
swimmer, still is amazing
Yeah.
swimmer. But he runs the Low Country Splash and he does this camp. So I was like, well, I'm going to do the camp. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And I was actually the fastest swimmer at that camp,
Ah.
which was shocking. I show up the first day and I'm just like, okay, this is the first time I'm actually like in a group coached setting. And I was really nervous, even though I was comfortable in the water, but this
Yeah.
was outside of, like, I was actually kind of on the team at that point and was feeling like these people are the same people that were on the team.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
not the case. These were the people, these were like the lap swimmers that I'd never met before,
Right.
that were
Yep.
maybe swimming at other places. So we show up and he's like, all right, let's just see everybody swim. So I think we just did like a snake through the thing, up and down. There were 7 lanes. So I guess we did I don't know, like a 300 or something. And I was just like way out in front of everybody. And I thought I was actually going slow. I'm like, where are all these people? What's happening? So I get out of the water, or I get to the end, and the coach, he was just like, who are you? Where did you come from? And I'm looking at myself like, who am I? How am I actually sort of, you know, in that moment? And the word maybe athlete kind of popped into my head. Like,
Right.
I don't know. This is fun. And then we just went through the camp, and I was pretty consistently, staying like the fastest person. And then, he did a lot of just drill stuff, and I was starting to learn how to be a swimmer, like all
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that a lot of people maybe had known all their lives, and learning some of the drills and some of the finer points, and then really having somebody watch me and give me pointers. And Doug had really kind of primed the pump on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had primed my own pump. So like every step along the way, I was just like 2 steps ahead of myself,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't really know it.
Right.
Right. So it just kind of kept building and building and building. And then race day shows up, and I'm so nervous because we had done the last night of camp was we went to a place called Trophy Lakes, which is a water ski park.
Mm-hmm.
So they have these 2 really long lakes next to each other that I think the one that we swim in, if you swim like a whole lap around the outside, like a giant oval, I want to say it's about an 800.
Okay.
So it's not a small lake, So
Mm-hmm.
we went out to the lake and we did like a couple of laps just as an opportunity to be in open water.
Mm-hmm.
They're fresh water. They're only like 40 feet deep, so it's not very scary. But even so, like, oh gosh, you can't see the bottom. It's dark,
Yeah.
the whole experience.
Yeah.
And for me, that was not scary at all because I had fallen off of water skis in the middle of
Right.
Tampa Bay as a kid 100
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Even though I had a life vest on, at this point, I felt really comfortable in the water. So I had zero
Open water
anxiety
was not
about
your
that.
right. Yeah. That's great.
And, having had that open water experience, water skiing, like, the salt water and the fact that it would be rough and all of those things, I never really realized that that was something that I was just very used to that other people wouldn't be. Having done all that water skiing as a kid
Right.
really
Yeah.
contributed a lot to my abilities at this
Mm-hmm.
point, and I never really even considered that.
Mm-hmm.
So, race day shows up, we get to the thing, and there's all these people, and I was very fish out of water, ha ha ha. At the beginning, like, okay, you got to put this Vaseline on. I'm like, what's that all about?
Yeah.
I don't even know that he had talked about that at the camp at all, or maybe he
Mm-hmm.
did. I just don't remember. So, I got my swim cap on, and as you can see, I'm very bald, so I
Right.
never wear a
Like,
cap.
why do
So
I need a cap? Yeah.
I think that was probably the first time for on the day of the race. Maybe I wore one at Trophy Lakes. I doubt it. So like that was uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and I get in the water, and it's an in-water start, so everybody gets in, and then they have then there's a fairly good current moving down the Cooper River. So you're trying to stay in a group, and they have like a line where the front is kind of pressed up against, and I'm in the water, and I'm just nervous, so nervous. Oh my gosh, because it's like, okay, this is it. You don't really know what's happening. And then I start swimming because the race starts. Oh my gosh. Those first 20 minutes, I thought I was going to die. I what are you doing? That you did not prepare properly. You don't know what you're doing. This is the stupidest thing you've ever done. I can't believe you actually thought you could do this. And I was gasping, and there were all these people, and I'm looking, trying to figure out where I'm at. I mean, this is
Mm-hmm.
just the big nightmare. And then all of a sudden, everything was okay.
Oh.
And I just keep swimming. And then at that point, you kind of round this corner, and there's this huge bridge in Charleston that goes over the harbor. And it's this massive thing. And you start to come up on the bridge. It kind of comes around the corner, and then you see it. And that was the point where I started to feel kind of like, oh, this is actually kind of okay. Like all of the panic had gone. And then it was just like, okay, just keep swimming, kind of shows up in your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the current has been building. They always make the swim happen so that it you're heading into the ebb flow out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's getting stronger. It's definitely not getting weaker.
Mm-hmm.
And it finishes at not a battleship, it's an aircraft carrier
Okay.
that is right next to the bridge. So once you see the bridge, you kind of know that you're getting close to the end. And as soon as you finish under the bridge, then you just go right to the aircraft carrier. And, remember just trying to swim to it. And at that point, it was getting kind of exciting, and I was getting a little tired, but it's like, okay, let's get to the end and let's make this happen. And then as soon as I got into the finish chute, I remember thinking, oh, it's over. Oh, can I do that again? Even though I felt like I was going to die at the beginning, just
Right.
this incredible, overwhelming feeling of I want to do that again. That was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The evolution of it was thrilling, and I've always been a little bit of a thrill seeker in my life. My drug addiction had a lot to do with thrill seeking. That was one of the fun reasons I ended up doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it fed that adrenaline kind of part of me. And I get out of the water, and there's all these people getting out of the water, and after a race, all the overwhelming feeling in the air was that everybody just accomplished that. There's also a 5-mile swim that happens at essentially the same time, so a lot of 5-milers are finishing at the same time as the 2.4.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of people. I think there's usually, I think, about 300 or 400 people that do the 2.4, and then around 120 that do the 5 miles, which is
Wow.
now a 6-mile race.
Mm-hmm.
They had to change the location of the start, so it turned into a 6-mile. But and then I felt like so amazing, and just the thing hit my head. Now I'd already talked to a few different people in Charleston that were into open water swimming, and before it was sort of like, oh, these people, they do this thing that I'm about to do.
Mm-hmm.
After doing it, I just remember being like, I think I'm one of them. I'd done one race, so I
Yeah.
had no evidence that I was actually, like gonna do anything more than that. But there was some feeling inside of me of like, and I think it was just my part of that addictive part of my personality, like that finishing race feeling was what I wanted again. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
if I want this again,
Yeah.
I gotta swim another race.
Yeah. So what was next?
Um, let's see, what was next?
How long ago was that? You'd mentioned you were 39, but was
Yeah, I turned 47 this year, so that was 8 years ago. So essentially almost 9 years ago was when I kind of started
mm-hmm.
any kind of real story about like some serious kind of swimming. And that's not very long at the end of the day. So I think I had made a deal with somebody that if I did the race and I liked it, that I would go ahead and join the masters team and
Mm-hmm.
start swimming practice with them. So that happened, and I went ahead and started actually swimming in the lane. I went all the way to the end, but very quickly, just like with the camp,
Hmm.
I moved up the lanes pretty fast because I was already kind of faster than a lot of the people that were there. I was learning the stroke, so I wasn't feeling like I needed to totally go crazy fast. But
Hmm.
two of the guys that I had kind of gotten familiar with, they started swimming in the practice as well. So it just kind of felt like natural. Again, I was a little bit ahead of myself, like a step or
Hmm.
two ahead before I even really realized where I was. Um, and then I'm pretty sure, no, I didn't do Beaufort that year. I think that was the only competition I did that year.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the next thing that I did, what was the next thing that I did? I don't even really remember at this point. But I just started swimming open water in Charleston. Like, we would go to the beach and we would swim down the front of Folly Beach every Sunday. I was starting to meet up with people that were doing this more and more. And then we would
Hmm.
do other little swims. There's lots of little rivers and inlets and places in Charleston. So at that point, I just started doing more and more of that,
Hmm.
um, without necessarily competing. And then the next race may have actually just been the splash the next year. I think
Hmm.
that probably was it, because we did a lot of open water stuff during that summer and into the fall. And it just became something that I was doing on the weekends. I was showing up to practice more and more. I got up to swimming 5 days a week at practice, and then we would go out, and it just became something that I was doing all the time, and I was
Hmm.
loving it. I had a kayak, so I could have somebody use my kayak to swim with us when we would do some of these uh, swims around town.
Hmm.
And it just kind of snowballed. And like, it's funny because I haven't really thought about a lot of those memories until we're having this conversation. And the specifics, all I remember is I was just having a really good time. Like, I found this new thing that I
Yeah.
absolutely loved. And maybe one day I kind of woke up and was like, oh, what happened to that other exercise regimen? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess I'm a swimmer now. I guess this is what I'm doing, because my body was cooperating at that
Yeah.
point. My body shape had changed, my muscle mass was starting to change. Um, and yeah, things were happening. And then the other guy that really changed my life was a guy named Brian Lanahan, who he attempted the English Channel a couple of times, but never completed it, but had done the camp at Cork a couple of times. And he's an avid open water swimmer. Um, and one day he just like walks up to me at the grocery store. I'm like sitting in the cafe working, and he just basically he asked me out as a swimmer buddy. I always joke with him, and I'm like, dude, you totally asked me out on a date when you came up and were like, I hear that you're like this guy that's swimming a lot, like, I want to swim with you. What's going on? And he had been planning a big swim around Folly Island, which is one of the beach islands in Charleston, and he accomplished it in 1 year. And then he was like, "You're going to do it next."
Mm. What was the distance for that?
16 miles. And I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't think I can do that." And he's like, "Sure you can." He's like, because at that point he had been swimming with us. I think he met me before. We kind of met before I was doing a lot of those. He was the person that was doing a lot of those open water swims around Charleston in between
Mhm.
the splash with me. So he was involved in that, and he was seeing what I was doing, and he just saw something in me again, just like Doug. He was like, "I think you got it in you, so we're gonna do this." So he I don't say he put me on a training schedule, but like, he just saw what I was doing and was like, "That's sufficient. If you just do what you're doing." and then we add a couple of longer swims in over time, and then you learn how to feed and do some of these things, you could probably make it happen. So over the course of about 6 months, I think, of agreeing to try, we did a couple of long swims at the 50-meter pool where we practiced a lot. And he we just, I did it pretty well. The longest swim we did in the pool was what did we do? We did 8 1500s or something, which sounds like a
That sounds
disgusting
crazy.
practice.
Wow.
But he was like, if you can do this, you can do the swim. And I did it. I mean, I crushed it with him. I was right on his feet the whole time, and it was awful. I mean, it really kind of changed my whole view on distance pool training.
Okay.
Like I really am not a big fan now of doing a lot of distance in a pool, just because flip turns are have never been my thing. And people on the team are always like, you need to work on your flip turns. And I'm like, no, I don't have walls in the open water.
Yeah.
And that's where I compete. Now I will say this, I started going to meets with the team.
Interesting.
And it wasn't because I was really interested in necessarily doing that, but it was fun to hang out with those people. I was like, all right, we go for a weekend, we'll just go to this pool and swim and like whatever. The first meet I did was at in Charleston, the one that we put on as a team. And it was kind of a joke. I just, all of the events I did were terrible. I actually swam the mile because at that point that seemed like, well, you're a distance swimmer, you're supposed to swim the mile. It was in a 25-yard pool that was kind of warm.
Oh, yuck.
I got out of that and I was just like, wow, that was really hard. And then after like 2 years, I was like, you know what? I will do sprints in the pool for meets, like 50s, 100s, 200s, maybe something a little longer, maybe, but I've basically given up. And it's fun to like, I'm a pretty fast sprinter, for at least I feel fast about it. I don't have really good nationals times or anything like that. Unless I put my in like the 75 age group, then I'm competitive.
Right. Something to aspire to. So we all, when we're in our 70s
right, I
and
got
80s,
40
I'll
years
go back
to get faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I actually went to nationals one year because it was in Greensboro, and they were just getting like the team like, oh, everybody's gotta go, it's gonna be fun. And you can swim at least 2 events without qualifying. So I was like, all right, I'll swim. I actually managed to qualify for my 50 free just like by the hair of my chin, whatever. So I swam 3 events, and that was really funny and humbling because when I looked at my times, I knew they would be poor. I knew I would probably be last in my age group, and I started shifting it upwards. And I was like, when am I competitive? And it was like I wasn't even placing until the 65s, and then I wouldn't even be in the top 3 until the 70s. And I was like, wow, like I have so long to get better at this. Yeah, at first it was a little dejecting, like, dang, I am slow. But I was like, this is nationals. These are the people that are really like, they're really working on their speed. Yeah. So it never made me feel
to practice their flip turns.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge part of where all my time is in my lousy flip turns that I need when I'm trying to swim 16 miles around an island.
Yeah. So tell us about that. So was that kind of your first marathon, or did you have something else in there?
No, that was it. That was really the first one. I we went in big.
Yeah, no 10K.
I know, right? I mean, I basically did it in the pool, so if you can count the pool practice as a marathon, which honestly I don't really, because I did the distance, but it's still not. It's got to be open water for me to really feel like it counts. So Brian basically he took care of everything. He arranged for, the support. I had 2 kayaks, no boat. You're really close to the land all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had done it with a boat. And because there's a few times around the ends of the island that are, the boat has to take a very much larger route to stay away from the sandbars, that he was like, the boat just really isn't all that necessary. If we do 2 kayaks, I think we'll be okay. And I'm just like, all right, I'm going to listen to you. And we show up on the day, and I had practiced feeding, and I felt like I was in a good place with that. And um at that point I had swum on the front of the Folly Island 2 or 3 seasons, I guess, of summer, 2 miles down the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So I was familiar with the water, and I was just like, yeah, we can probably do this. And one of the practice swims, we swam along the back of the island. And that's about a 10K. So maybe that was my first marathon, but that was just a practice swim, so I don't really count that one
Yeah,
in
right.
as much. So I had swum part of it. I hadn't swum around the ends of the islands, but I had done the front, I'd done the back, and I was like, we can do this. So we show up, and we started on the north end of the pier, swam around the pier, and then down the front of the beach is pretty simple. You're swimming outside the breakers, and this was the exact route that we had swum every Sunday for a long time. And I remember the first time they hit me on the head for a feed, and I was like, already?
Wow.
Because I had determined that about 30 minutes was my window of
Mm-hmm.
time, and I didn't want to get in a deficit right away. So I was like,
Right.
go ahead and let me at least drink something. I don't necessarily maybe need to have a full, but let me just get something down on
Mm-hmm.
that first one regardless. So they hit me on the head, and it was like 30 minutes in. I was like, wow, okay, that was fast. So I think I just drank a little something, and it's like, all right, let's just put our head down, keep swimming. And by the time I made it to the end of the island, that was the next feed. And then that was when you're getting ready to go into probably the worst part of the swim, because
Okay.
these are very these are barrier islands. They are very much run by a lot of currents that run from
Mm-hmm.
behind the island. There's rivers that go inland, and there's a lot of sandbars. And this part of the swim is, you got waves coming from all directions,
Wow.
and it's brutal. That particular day was not a horrible day, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter because it's all about the way that water's working. So we get into it, and I remember I had swam in some conditions, but nothing quite like that. And
Mm-hmm.
we had 2 kayaks, so Brian went all the way to basically where I needed to go, and then Jamie stuck with me. And that was rough. I mean, every 5 minutes I'd kind of look up at her and be like, which way am I going? Because it was just so, you had no idea which way was up. And she would just go, swim to the red kayak, so I'd look, oh, over there. So I'd go a little bit and then come back out, and then it would be turn around, and then all of a sudden it would just disappear.
Huh.
Because once you got around the edge of the island, that really crazy spot missed. And it was that time, it was like time for another feed. And that was, I took a little bit of a longer break at that point, but I knew that now it was just going to be a nice easy swim, and I knew I could do it, and just kind of like put my head down and started swimming. And at that point, the tide is pushing you behind the island. So the tide on the outside is, there's nothing there. You don't really feel it going through the wave boxes, because that's just crazy. But once you get around
Mm.
the island, then it just starts to pick up. So it was like, ooh, this is nice and
Yeah.
easy, So, and it's beautiful. I mean, there's just you can't see hardly any houses or buildings, because
Oh,
the
wow.
marsh behind is massive. So it's a
Mm.
beautiful, beautiful swim. And I was just really having a nice day. And it was kind of cloudy, but not uh, overcast and depressing, but it just wasn't really like just sun on my back.
Right, right.
And we just kept swimming, and then eventually you can see this beautiful lighthouse in the distance that is on the top of the island.
Mm.
And I could see that coming up, and you kind of have to snake a little bit to get to the break point, where that's the one big part of the swim that has to be calculated really well, because the timing on it is that you have to be behind the island as the tide's coming in. You got to reach that break point, and then it's got to switch, and then it takes you back out. And if you miss that, you're going to have a hard time getting in there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're too early, you're still going to be swimming in, because that break point really is like where it comes together. So
Wow.
we timed it. Brian's really good about being able to time stuff, and he knew how fast I was generally swimming, and I managed to keep the good pace.
Mm-hmm.
So we reached that break point at, you got about a 20-minute window at this particular place. And I think I was slightly early, which was fine. Because at that point it's just kind of a slack tide, and then it just kind of takes you out, and then you round the island. And then the second crossing of the top of the island is a lot easier. There are a lot of sandbars, but because the way that uh, who knows, just the hydrology of that
Mm-hmm.
space, it's not as difficult to kind of round. But then you get to the challenging part of the swim, because it's just a straightaway in the ocean, and you got to pass the pier. Because
Uh,
if you start on the north end, it's the best way to know you've circumnavigated is to go ahead and get to the south side,
yeah.
right? So unfortunately, I looked up and I saw the pier a little
Oh,
too
too
early.
soon. Oh man. That's why they tell people never look for France when you're swimming to
Yeah,
when you're swimming to France.
exactly. So that was a bit of a mistake. And
Yeah.
then it's just all these houses on the beach that kind of look the same. So
Hmm.
it's, you almost feel like you're not making any forward progress, even though
Hmm.
you are.
You are right. Yep.
It just doesn't, you don't have any more landmarks.
Yeah.
The whole backside of the swim, you're along this marsh and you're seeing all these different things. So it's changing. This part, it's the end of the swim at this
Yeah.
point. I'm
Yeah.
getting salt mouth.
Tired salt mouth. Yeah.
I'm starting to get tired. I'm
Hmm.
starting to get a little over it. Like, I don't know if I really want to do this. Oddly enough, that was exactly the point where I had a tracker.rs
Hmm.
on, but it died, the phone.
Oh.
So everybody that was watching
Oh.
thought I bailed.
Oh man.
But I didn't know this, of
Yeah.
course, we didn't find out till later. So energetically, like all the people that were pulling for me kind of stopped. And I think I
Oh.
probably felt that a little bit, because I was just sort of like, this really sucks. But the good news, though, was that it was a really smooth day. Like I had a very smooth swim all the way down. It was just long, and that was just the first time where it's like, all right, this is where you got to really dig deep.
Yeah.
This is the sport now.
Right. Right.
Like after hour 4, you are in a place where you cannot get there unless you've swum for 4 hours.
Right.
Like that was really the introduction to, all right, you have now arrived. Like you
Mm.
have put on the sneakers to get
Mm.
onto the track.
Mhm.
This other part, this was just whatever. The
Mhm.
first 3 hours of swimming is no big deal. Like once you,
Mhm.
for me, crossing that 4 hour mark was like, okay, this was the real deal. So, and I knew that, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to make this happen. And I started to feed a little too often, but they were cheering me on, and I knew that some people were coming. So Janine Sorrell.
Mhm.
So she was actually driving from New York,
Ah.
and she was basically racing to try to be there at the end of the swim. And I
Oh.
knew that she was potentially going to be there. I did not know what her schedule was, but I knew she was going to be there. I heard there was a few other people that were showing up. So I just kind of was like, all right, I gotta make it for not only me, but these other people that
Mhm.
believe in me and whatever.
Mhm.
And luckily there was some rain that happened in the city, but it never came out to Folly. Like we just had sort of like some passing clouds. The sun was getting ready to set. I was getting to the pier, and then I rounded that pier and got out of the water, and I didn't know what to expect. I kind of thought that I would be like a jellyfish getting out of the water, but it really wasn't that bad when I stepped out of the water. It was just sort of like I just kind of felt like maybe I had just swum for an hour or so. It was kind of weird. Um,
You
and
go in this time warp sometimes.
yeah, yeah, it was
Like the
really
sun setting,
just
you've been out there for a long time, but you're just like, what?
yeah, because we started I think we started at 12:30. It was 6 hours and 40 minutes was my time. And it's because we never totally tracked the whole thing. It's a pretty good assumption that it was somewhere between 15 and 16 miles, maybe a little bit longer, considering I probably did a little bit of this, so I probably was, 16 is probably a pretty good number to say. And yeah, I got out and just like suddenly just felt elated. Similar, I was a little more tired, but similar to that first time I got out of the 2.4 mile race for the Low Country Splash, and was just like I just did that.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing that hit me was I'm not hungry. And I think part of me was thinking that there was going to be like this giant feast, and I would eat like the most food I'd ever eaten. And I'm a foodie, so like that's one of the reasons I like to swim, is because it fuels my ability
Yes.
to eat.
Eat. I'm a big
But
fan
I
of food
was,
myself.
I mean, after all of the food that I had been taking in the
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, which was really like that was I really realized like how important that is, because I was never hungry. I never felt like I was behind on my calories at all.
Mm-hmm.
The tiredness was really just a little bit of boredom, and then just a little bit of muscle soreness, but I never felt like I was out of gas.
Right. Right. That's good.
Um, so, getting out of the pool, or getting out of the water, it's like, all right, well, the gas tank is still kind of full, because it, certainly didn't swim to the end of my abilities. And then
Uh-huh.
when I got home, I don't know, I wasn't even really that tired. The whole thing was so weird. It was just such a, uh, the endorphins, I guess, were taking over. And
Right.
um, I just was like, all right, what am I going to do next? Because
Yeah.
it was a beautiful day. I had really great conditions. I do have to say, like the wind was easy. There was no rain. The sun was just enough to keep it warm, but not like I felt like I was baking in the sun. And the tide went really well, and then it was just an easy day on the surf. Like there wasn't a lot of crazy waves that I was having to deal with. It was relatively gentle. So the conditions really were a huge part of my success. Had I had to
Right.
really trudge through that last 2 miles, I think it may have had a different result.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm really
Well,
grateful that I did have good conditions for that first swim, because just getting it under your belt, I feel, with anything, like the first time you just get it done, that can be enough motivation to get you through later. But if you have to really, like not only do you have to get a swim done, but you have to do a difficult one, like
mm-hmm.
that's just a lot to kind of put on. So yeah, it was great. I had a great swim, and just was like, all right, what's next? Uh I think the big goal that I created after that one was there's another set of islands to the north, Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms. And
Mm-hmm.
I think before I did my folly swim, Brian had swum around those two islands, which that one's like 20 miles. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a little more challenging because you have to pass an inlet, and there it's just a different swim, a little bit longer. And I thought, well, that could be an easy next target. So I kind of put
Mm-hmm.
that down as like a main target, and then I'll just do all these other smaller swims that are around here. There's a 3 mile swim up in Augusta, there's a 3 mile swim in Beaufort. There was another marathon down in Jacksonville that we did, the up the river downtown, I think it was called. Probably should have pulled out my little list of all the other swims that I've done,
That's
but I
okay. We
just
don't have
but
to
I
go
just
into each and every one. I'm kind of
yeah,
curious,
but
like
I
more.
just kept swimming and just kept showing up for more and more events.
Mm-hmm.
And the other big one that I did though was 2 years ago out in Portland. I did the Portland Bridge Swim,
Oh, nice. Sorry, I missed you.
um, which that was a tough one too. Whew, the way that the currents run in that river,
It's
and
yeah,
it was pretty chilly. Um,
yeah, for you from the
but that
south, yeah.
but that was a beautiful swim. But that actually really got me into more cold water enjoyment, because then
Oh,
we
nice.
swam over the winter.
Ah,
And
nice.
then now I'm up in New York.
Mm,
And last winter, I swam in a lake all the way down to 48.
nice. So you're
And that's
crossing
sort
the
of become
threshold.
my next interest,
Hmm.
is all the cold water stuff, because I really, really like it.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of having taken this path, everything it took for you to get here, what would you say like the marathon part of the path has contributed to you has contributed to you?
Well, I mean, if anything, it definitely has proven to me that, like, if I can do something, if I set my mind on it, I can
Mhm.
do it.
Yeah.
And I guess the other piece that I didn't talk about when I realized that, oh, as a yogi, I should swim with a breathing exercise to learn how to
Mhm.
breathe. Well, the thing that I realized pretty quickly, which is why I was enjoying that distance swimming, was that it's meditation.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So after, I forget what year it was, but there was a point where I stopped actually teaching yoga, and then I stopped doing any yoga, because most of my yoga practice was, I started finding it in the water.
Mm.
Because there is a lot of benefit to postural yoga for sure, but
Mhm.
the true aim is meditation. So, and stilling your mind and being comfortable with yourself and all of these things. So I really started to find that in the water, and in a different way too, because sitting in front of a candle for 30 minutes can be challenging,
Mm.
but you never really go. I mean, some people do, but it's just really not much of an endeavor of like, oh, how long can we meditate? But
Mm.
how long can you swim? That can be a great endeavor. And
Mhm.
honestly, that's a huge part of the way that I look towards it, is like, this is an opportunity to work on meditation and
Yeah.
become even more of a master of my own mind while I'm in the water. And then I'm doing something that is physical for me. So it's just good cardiovascular.
Mhm.
Literally, the biology is loving it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then that translates into a good feeling of the body, which allows one to meditate deeper. And so it's really become a huge part of my yoga practice,
Wow.
interestingly enough.
That's pretty cool.
And I kind of came back to yoga in a different way, because after a few years of being off, I was like, gosh, like, I don't see my yoga friends as much, and I should be doing this yoga. What's wrong? So I was
Mm.
trying to go to class, and I just couldn't do it. It
Hmm.
just, I wasn't interested. If I did go, I didn't want to go back. It just felt weird. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Why do I don't know? That's when I really realized that I was getting most of my practice from swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, well, if I really feel like, doing yoga is beneficial, I was like, wait a minute. There are different styles.
Hmm.
There's different reasons one can do different types of yoga. So I thought, what I really need is recovery.
Ah, yeah. Nice.
because I had started lifting weights as well. I started hitting the gym just to increase my upper body strength to help with the endurance and just to get stronger as a swimmer. But
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing a lot of stretching, and that was the thing. That was part of the thing. I was like, I should do yoga because it's good for stretching and whatever. So I was like, well, wait a minute, why don't I do the stretchy yoga? So why don't I do Yin Yoga, which is
Mm-hmm.
you lay around on the floor and you just kind of roll around and stretch for an hour.
Sounds amazing after a
And
long swim.
yeah, yeah. And the first time I went to a yin class, I was like, oh, this is it. And then I started going every week, like twice a week, and recognizing like this was really like the next step of this was the evolution of my yoga practice was swimming. And that was probably the biggest way that swimming in the marathon type of swimming has really contributed to me as a person, was that I was a yogi. I've always become that. And that was something that saved my life from my addiction. And everybody, like once you start getting into like the teen and 20 years of practicing yoga, it really changes for a lot of people. And as that matures and changes, it looks a lot different for everybody. But you can't really be like, well, how's it going to look different for you? You have no idea. So this was really the beautiful development of how I changed and grew as a yogi, and like saw this expansion. And interestingly enough, I had become a vegetarian for like almost 14 years. Well, I'm not a vegetarian anymore because the body needs a different set of fuel
Mm.
for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that like everybody that does endurance sports can't be a vegan if you want to be. If it works for you, it does. But for me, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't working anymore. I
Right.
actually went to dinner one night with Janine, and I looked at her and I was like, I'm going to have a hamburger. And she was like, what? Because she knew me as a vegetarian at that
Yeah.
point. And I was like, yeah, I've been thinking about it lately. My body's been saying, you want meat. And I would be like, are you sure? I haven't eaten meat in, almost 14 years. Like,
Yeah.
really? But it never made me sick. And I actually started like my training jacked up right after that. And that was
Wow.
really a major shift for me because I was happy being vegetarian, and it was actually a part of how I identified myself. So that was one more time where I had to come up against like, well, who am I and what's going on with me and what's my place in the world and all of these things. So, it has really helped me with my introspection, and it has definitely made me even more of a better entrepreneur, because that's what I've been for, gosh, almost 20 years at this point, and it's kept me on my path. So it really um, has become just a huge part of my life. Like if wherever I'm at, I'm like, where can I swim? Who can I be
Mm-hmm.
with? And
Mm-hmm.
I had moved to New York for COVID. My mother uh, was living with me in Charleston, and my brother lives up here in New York, and we all moved in together because she was ill, and we realized that if we weren't together as a family, we weren't going to be. So we came up here,
Mm-hmm.
and it was during COVID. So how are you going to meet people and be in a place? Well, I was like, there's got to be a lake. There's got to be people swimming outside.
Yep. Yep.
So it actually saved my sanity
Wow.
caring for my mother as she died from lung cancer,
Oh
so like
gosh.
my ability to go swim a few days a week was, a rock that I could lean on,
Yeah.
that allowed me to be, because I was her primary caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
so, and I'm also caring for my brother and his kids, and like it's COVID. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
the, the
Yeah.
worst year ever, and the one thing that I managed to be able to maintain was my swimming.
Yeah.
Certainly not maintained it in the way that I would have preferred, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, I'm in this place, I got to get in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to just pick that up and lean on it allowed me, like I said, to be whole so that I could support my family and myself and not like totally go crazy during this
Right.
crazy year with all of these challenges. So I really look at swimming as something that for me has I don't know, it's just I can't imagine life without it now
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I could never have understood back in when I first walked into that pool, you know.
Right.
And the other thing that I do want to say is the thing that I like about the swimming community is that everybody that is a marathoner is an accidental meditator. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I've met a lot of swimmers and I talk a lot and I bring up a lot of conversation and I've talked about yoga and meditation. And there's many swimmers who will flat out tell me, I don't meditate. I don't do any of that stuff. And I'm like, you kind of do.
Right.
You know, I mean, and then that's the beauty of meditation is that you,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to call it anything. Like you don't
Right.
have to say you're on the path. You don't have to claim it.
Mm-hmm.
If you just show up in any way, you're going to get these benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, marathon swim, they're just such a chill, awesome, loving group of people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that right there is another part of it is like, everywhere I go, I just meet all these fantastic people
Mm-hmm.
and it's been such a really great community, you know. And I do I've because I also was a kayaker previously and I had a
Mm-hmm.
kayak. I've done a lot of support for swimming. So like last 2 years ago I paddled for Swim the Suck. And the reason I did it was because I want to swim it. So I was like, let me paddle it for somebody first,
Yeah.
meet all the people, and then the next year I'll go back and swim it and kind of
Yeah.
like have this experience of knowing who's there. And, you know, and I want to reach out and support other people in their swims and stuff, and knowing that then people will support me. And
Yeah.
it's just this really give and take exchange that I can do till I'm like 90, you know? I mean, like this
Exactly.
isn't
Yeah.
something I feel like I ever have to give up. You know, your
Exactly.
distance may decrease, but so what? It's not
Right.
about it was never about the distance anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I wanna I wanna make sure we capture you did such a great reflection on your, on what marathon swimming's given to you. I wanna hold on that and I wanna come back, maybe we'll have you back and just talk about how you kinda came to be kayaking and above the water and all that. But boy, what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know that I've ever really shared my swim story. Maybe pieces of it, but I don't think
Mhm.
I've really kind of gone from the beginning to end. So this was a little bit of a journey for me too, of like, oh wow, I haven't really thought about this. Like,
Right?
okay.
It's kind of a beautiful thing. That's why I love marathon swim stories, is because we don't often stop and take stock of that necessarily. So,
Yeah,
and it's a
it feels so natural, you know. It's just what I'm doing, you know. Like
mhm,
I don't need to necessarily log what's happening because it just is what I'm doing. I don't feel like it's something that I do in addition to my life.
mhm,
It's a huge part of what supports my life and will continue to do so.
right,
And for me, I think that's the most exciting part
right,
is
mhm,
that I don't feel like I need to have any plan. Well, what would you do when you have to stop swimming?
right,
Well, I'll just die.
right, right. Yeah. Or maybe
I
I'll
don't
die
have to make
swimming.
that plan.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Yes. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Ken. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Do you want to take Marathon Swim Stories with you? Subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. Want to connect with like-minded limit pushers? Join us for Marathon Swim Stories live on Tuesdays at 5:30 a.m. Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, 13:30 GMT. Thanks for watching.